Jon Cruys is a man of many interests. Not only watches, not only his job in the environmental services sector, we're talking motorcycles, aviation, diving with sharks that we'll get to, and making his own watches. Jon, thanks for sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
I want to start with some cool stories right off the bat. Maybe we go with this Tudor Black Bay 58, which a lot of people have seen before. Tell me a little bit about your diving experience and how this watch fits in.
So I started diving in about 2016, and I passed my different levels, and until now I have about a bit over 300 dives.
300, wow, okay.
And I used to live in Asia a lot, so it's diving in the Pacific. Water is quite warm, super comfortable. On the Black Bay 58, what I really love about it, it's so simple, it's readable. The bezel is very easy to use. It's only 60 clicks. I rather have 60 clicks than 120 clicks.
Yeah.
For scuba diving, I always take my dive computer with me because it allows me to see the depth, which I cannot see on the Black Bay. So usually I put my dive computer on the left, or sometimes my dive computer and the Black Bay 58, or I put the Black Bay 58 on my right hand and the dive computer on my left hand.
You're someone who wears their watches, which I really, really enjoy. We have a couple other modern watches on the table. I want to get to vintage real quick, and maybe let's start with one you have on your wrist.
So this is Omega CK2444. Also named as Dirty Dozen.
Yes.
From 1945. I traced back the serial number, and it's from July 1945. Super interesting watch because at the time the Ministry of Defense from England asked to have 150,000 watches, and 12 brands replied.
Yep, the Dirty Dozen.
The Dirty Dozen, exactly. So you have IWC, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Records, Grana, and Omega. And so Omega delivered 25,000 of those watches. They all follow the same specification. So a black dial, white numerals, luminescent materials on the hands and the numerals, and a sub-second at 6. The watch needed to be shockproof, but also waterproof. So on the back of the watch, you see a few symbols. You see WWII, that stands for wrist, watch, and waterproof. And then you have the very famous broad arrow that is on all the British military equipment. So you have it on the case back as well as on the dial just below the Omega logo.
Are you going to get any of the other 11 brands, you think, or are you good for now?
I tried looking at the cheaper ones, Timor, Records, but I thought that one would be enough, and that would be the Omega.
It's a watch with a very full life, and I want to move on to another vintage one you have over here. What can you tell me about the WWII chronograph?
So it's a chronograph from 1962. The reason I know it is because there's an engraving on the case back. So it was probably a gift from someone to somebody else, and engraved 1962. Chronographs from the 50s and the 60s are really amazing. Their movements are beautiful. This one has a Venus 188. On the dial, again, we're very simple dial, but there's a small detail that I really love in the sub-register of the minutes is the lines at 3, 6, and 9 that we often find on vintage chronographs, and people often think, what's the reason behind that? And the reason is because when you were placing international calls in a phone cabin in the streets, every dollar you put or quarters would give you 3 minutes for talking.
There we go. See, that's the funny thing is now that we are vintage watch enthusiasts, we have a very romantic view of these things, but people just needed to know when the parking meter was going to run out and things like that. Now, we hear a lot about the Venus 178 movement through the Navitimer primarily, and then you have the brother of that movement in here with the 188. What is it about Venus movements that's cool to you?
So the previous versions used a column wheel, and this has a shaft, so it's improved in terms of reliability. Also for production, it makes it much easier. But we have another watch that has a later movement very close to this one.
And that's this Lip Mach 2000, right?
Yes, the full name is Lip Mach 2000 Dark Master Chronograph.
There we go, a mouthful, yeah. Designed by?
Roger Talon, a French designer, famous for designing furniture, trains, interior of airplanes.
These are really interesting watches. I've seen them online, but it feels like something like pulled out of a design museum.
Yes, in fact, Roger Talon, as I was saying, designed multiple pieces, including furniture, and he designed a staircase, very particular design, that you can see in the MoMA here in New York.
For what is this, a 1970s watch? In very good condition still.
It is. I'm very careful with some of my watches. With the two-door, I don't mind it banging around and having scratches. But with this one, I have to be very careful because the pushers are in rubber, and the case is black PVD. So it's black PVD from about 50 years ago. I'm not sure it's going to stand scratches and shocks.
So a very distinctive design, but what's under the hood here?
So it's a Valjoux 7734. We were talking earlier about the Venus 188. When Venus went bankrupt, Valjoux acquired all the equipment of the Venus 188, and they replicated the same movement, named or renamed the 7730. And so this one is a later version of the 7730.
Cool on the inside, cool on the outside. Does this one get a lot of wrist time?
It does a lot for Christmas and winter times, yes.
Yeah, there's your little ornaments over here, basically. Before we get to the other heat that's on this table, including watches that you've made yourself, I want to talk about where it all began, which is this Festina here. What's going on?
It's the only quartz watch on the table here, but I received that watch from my grandmother. And I was 15. It was my real first watch because I had flick-flacks, I had Casios, some swatches, but this for me was like the real watch, and it had a chronograph. As a young kid, you like things with pushers, gadgets. It has also an alarm function. So I kept it for many years. As you can see, there's many scratches on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I still have it.
How did it feel to wear this watch when you were so young? Is this what really sparked the love for it?
It's felt that I had the liberty of finally moving around, because we didn't have phones back in the days. So this was the only tool that could tell me what time I should go back home for dinner.
And then, yeah, now you're flying planes, riding motorcycles, diving in the ocean. I think the mobility aspect has really taken a foothold in your life.
Definitely.
Next up, I want to talk about a watch that I've seen online, but this is the first time seeing in person. And it kind of represents how you've gotten into the world of independence.
Yes, I have strong interest in independence. I have huge respect for small companies, people who launch their own businesses, because it requires a lot of work. It requires even more work when you launch a watch brand, because you have all the design elements and it has to please to people. Very young, I remember going to my dad's workshop. He was working on several lathes and engine turning, and it was always fascinating to see how engine turning is being used to remove materials of metal blocks. And so when I discovered Guilloche a couple of years ago, I thought, wow, I would like to acquire a Guilloche dial, but I couldn't afford one, obviously for many reasons financially. What I could afford was an Atelier Win. They are using Guilloche handmade dials, and the pattern is beautiful. It catches the light in many different kind of directions.
Gorgeous,
It's really mesmerizing because you see circles sometimes being round, sometimes sunbursts, and it goes in every direction.
Yeah, we have a barleycorn guilloche, I believe is the technical term, which one of the benefits is very open to interpretation. What is it about this watch that, after owning it for a while, you really appreciate?
Foremost, it's super comfortable. I can wear it during the summer, the winter. I get so many compliments of that watch. It catches the light as no other watch that I have.
I want to move on before we get to the watches that you, Jon, have made yourself. I want to hit on this Breguet right here. The most, expensive watch on the table, of course, and probably the most different as well, I would say. What drew you to this one in particular? So
I turned 40 last year, and this was my birthday gift. I always wanted to acquire a Breguet, and the Tradition for me was a dream watch. And there's many reasons for that. Is because you can see all the small details on the watch. So you have the Breguet hands, you have the Guilloche dial, and you have frosted plates. You have some chamfering on the edges as well. Then you have the parachute invention from Breguet that holds on the top of the balance wheel, and so many more details like engraving. on the front and also on the back.
Breguet is a brand that gets overlooked a lot. I think people, in that price point will go for a Patek or a Lange or an Urban Jurgensen, or I don't know, whatever it is. What about Breguet drew you to it versus some of the competition?
So the design first. And as I was mentioning, all the finishing on this watch. Breguet is a brand that I love a lot. And the design here is actually based on a pocket watch back in the days where Abraham Louis Breguet did not want competition to copy his watch. So he made an architecture very complex to copy and not traditional. And this is what we have here represented.
Yeah, an untraditional architecture at the time that we now call the Tradition Collection.
Exactly.
And you've taken that watchmaking spirit from the greatest watchmaker of all time and applied it to your own life as well. We'll start small with this little swatch over here.
About 2 years ago on Instagram, I see Atom Moore, exceptional person and photographer here based in New York, showing his swatch with a mechanical automatic movement. It grasped my attention. I was wondering, where is that coming from? Because I'd never seen it before. And there was a company actually called the Watch Chop Shop.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
And they were taking those old cases from the 90s with the automatic movement. And if I'm not wrong, it's a ETA 2841. And taking other dials, more modern, and bringing them together, a bit like a Frankenwatch.
Yeah, a chop shop for real.
Exactly. Because I already knew how to assemble, to a certain level, watches, I thought, I'm going to try to make it. And so this is the first version that I created with a very special dial that some people know.
Yeah, don't be too late, it says.
Exactly. And I wear that watch mostly on holidays, and I feel very comfortable with that watch traveling.
Is this the kind of project that people could do at home?
Definitely. It's not very complicated. You just need a few screwdrivers, a good light, loop, some tools to set the hands, and yeah, it can be done quite easily.
And from there, we moved on to a more complex watch, which actually has your name on the dial.
So a friend of mine asked me, John, why don't you make a watch? And when he told me that, I did not know where to start. And I even told him that it was impossible. It's a level of detail and of work that I could not understand. So it took me roughly a year to learn online with YouTube videos, with books. My friend watchmakers gave me also help. And I created my first watch. So I bought all the pieces online from Autofray. Maybe some people know about that website. I bought the movement in Switzerland, and I assembled my first watch. The special thing about this one is that I did not want to only do assembly. I wanted to make my own dials. So at the time, I partnered with a friend, and together we were making our own dials, starting from a brass plate of 0.4 millimeter thick, cutting it, doing the pad printing, and then on this particular one, and there's only one made, we asked a company to laser engrave as strong as possible so that we can see holes through the dial, and which makes the numerals. So at 3, 6, 9, 12, it was laser cut, and we have put loom paste inside to make it very thick.
Yeah, so a little bit like a sandwich dial.
Exactly,
in a way, you get that like depth and like scooped out numeral with the loom inside. And yeah, you're right. Like as you angle it around, you can see the ridges of the numerals as well.
And the very tricky technical challenge that we had on the pad printing is to make sure that it's aligned with the 3, 6, 9, 12.
Well, this is going to be a very obvious thing to say, but I've never seen one of these before. Jon, this has been so fun going through your journey of watch collecting and watchmaking, from your Festina that you got from your grandmother to the independent friends that you've made, the vintage pieces that you have in your collection, some really classic stuff, some weirder stuff, and then getting into actually getting hands-on with this hobby as well. Jon, this has been so much fun. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you so much for having me, Thomas.
This is Jon Cruys. I'm Thomas Hendricks. Subscribe to the Chrono24 channel if you haven't already for more videos just like this.